Welcome to Shared Insights, the podcast from BA Insight. My name is Pete Wright, and I'm thrilled to welcome back to the show Christian Buckley. Welcome, Christian.
Well, thanks for having me again.
Now, our regular listeners will remember Christian. He's founder and CEO of CollabTalk, six-time Microsoft MVP, and he is here today to share with us news of note around a major hybrid SharePoint research project he conducted in partnership with grad students at the Marriott School of Management at Brigham Young, designed to give us a better understanding of the landscape of organizations actively pursuing hybrid SharePoint. Now, Christian, as we record this, the results of this project dropped yesterday.
They did, yep.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting, right? You've got to be filled with relief and
I'm tired, yeah.
Yeah, excited for the sleep to come. Before we dig into some of the specific insights, tell us the story behind this initiative. What were you trying to answer with this research?
Yeah, well, it's interesting for those that are in the SharePoint space and work with hybrid and know that this is it's not like this just popped on the scene in the last year or so. That's years back working for another SharePoint ISV as we started to see the uptick in interest around Office 365 and SharePoint as part of the Office 365 platform and SharePoint Online, that there were a lot of questions about parity between what is online and on-prem. And while initially Microsoft was very gung-ho on we're all in on the cloud and you must be in the cloud and you're a fool if you don't aren't looking at your cloud strategy, but the reality is that there was a disconnect. Certainly within the sales and marketing message coming out of Microsoft, but a lot of confusion where I think there were overeager salespeople that were out and saying, of course you can do everything that you're doing on-prem in the cloud, which just simply wasn't the case. And so here we are, fast forward, Microsoft is learned from a lot of those messaging mistakes, but there is still not 100% parity between on-prem and online. And even when there is parity, it's fairly close. There are new differences now where Microsoft is focused on developing that cloud first, mobile first experiences. And I think most people are familiar now as we've gone through this with a couple revs. With different features that there are things that don't make sense for on-prem that are developed out for the cloud, and there will also be features that are developed for those that are still on-prem that won't be out in the cloud because it just doesn't make sense. But the messaging is getting better. I think the cadence of the release of those features are better. However, what we didn't have then was any data around where are those gaps. Where are people still struggling today? Where should they be aware? Because ultimately, it's not good for people to be in the dark. And it helps Microsoft from a sales and marketing perspective. It helps ISVs and consulting companies, SIs, as well to understand, hey, here are opportunities for us to go and do more, build new products, provide more services to fill these gaps. And it helps for customers to understand kind of the state of hybrid so that they know, again, they're not going in wide-eyed, uninformed about what is actually possible or where they may have difficulties. It's always good to look and see, hey, it's not just us struggling with this aspect of our environment, and I can better plan and build my strategy because I understand where those gaps are and what my options are for moving that forward. So that was really kind of the genesis of this, is to provide some definitive data around the size, the scope, the gaps, the opportunities for hybrid.
Everybody pretty much knew that Microsoft was moving in this direction. They were bullish on moving
right.
To the cloud, and that BA Insight and other ISVs like them also had sort of moved that way. What's your perspective as you're talking to ISVs and partners about their take on the research that now that they're seeing it?
Well, so it's interesting. I think it's not that there were any real surprises in how people responded. It is trying to put some scientific accuracy behind the percentages of the community that are being affected by some of the various topics. That's what was more interesting there. But from an ISV perspective, in particular, there is a certain amount of, hey, look, these are features, these are things which we can do, which make sense for the people's environments today. But there almost needs to be this working together of vendor and customer to understand, hey, this is where it's going. What are those kind of future gaps? Again, those opportunities in the future where we don't have product today, we don't have services today, but we see this because Microsoft is moving this direction that there's these needs. I mean, I'll put in that category. There are things that we just don't fully understand yet about where there may be opportunities around search or around, governance and administration and reporting. There's a lot of fantastic stuff that's coming out in Office 365. So then there's the question of, okay, yeah, but what of those things light up and those things that are impacted by hybrid? What else can we do to fill those gaps? Where, there are great features that are being around, like the personal analytics is a great example, which are limited in the scope of the data that they go and look at. They're not drawing from, just automatically from those hybrid, for those on-prem components. It's from those online-only components. So what can a partner do to go and help fill in those gaps? I mean, we just don't know what we don't know. And so by having data like this and understanding, hey, 60% of environments, customers that are moving towards hybrid are experiencing this issue. Hey, there's an opportunity for us to go in and solve that. Here's how we're going to do that.
So let's talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts of the survey itself. How'd you go about it?
Yeah.
You worked in partnership with BYU and Microsoft as a sponsor?
Yes. So they are actually the lead sponsor, the platinum sponsor of it. Yeah. This thing started out, it was an idea. So it was actually last fall. So I had moved my family from the Seattle area to the Salt Lake area, and I did part of my undergrad at BYU back in the 80s. And so went down just to kind of establish a relationship and got into conversation with the gentleman who runs essentially the on-campus internship program with the business school there, which is a top 25 ranked program there, one of the leading marketing programs in the country. I think it's even in like the top 5 or the top 3 for the marketing side. But just had this conversation. It was just more kind of a general interest. And as talking about these ideas of things that I'd love to go and do, it was just kind of this, hey, this is a topic that I've been talking about for years and there's no data, and just kind of, probing Microsoft, like, hey, are you going to go do something similar? And they said, well, hey, we have this program to go and do these field research things using graduate students that are interested there. And so it just kind of came together. I ended up going to at the MVP Summit, which Microsoft has annually for SharePoint, Office 365, and all of the other MVPs around the world kind of come together annually on campus there in Redmond, Washington. And I just floated this idea to Jeff Teeper and Dan Holm and a few of the other leadership there with the SharePoint OneDrive team. And Jeff responded right away and was like, yeah, awesome. We definitely need this. It's a gap. Like, let's do it. Talk to Dan, make it happen. Dan saw it and said, Dan Holm, like, yes, we need to do this. Like, we're on board. It's like, but the person who needs to own it from our side is Bill Baer. And I just don't want to commit his time because he's a busy guy. And Bill Baer being, one of my former peers when I was at Microsoft and been in this space. And he's been one of the most vocal throughout SharePoint's history of the hybrid topic. And he saw it and said, yeah, I've got a lot going on, but let's do this. And so it just kind of came together very quickly, kicked off in January. And it was actually the way that they do the program is that they, the professors, because there's a couple faculty advisors that are a part of this, but the students actually kind of show their interest and then a team is selected. And my understanding is that almost everybody is part of the MBA program, like raised their hands, like, yes, want to be part of this program, part of this project. And so we kind of picked the team and put it together and kicked that off. It was we put a plan together. The team went out and did about 700-800 hours of research. There was a survey that was open for 30 days as part of that, that primary research to go and actually survey customers and partners and MVPs and other influencers. There were about 100 different interviews, one-on-one interviews that were also conducted there. And then a lot of secondary research. Microsoft did some internal only studies. There were other reports done by like SolarWinds. There's some great data that was out there that was more kind of generically cloud focused versus SharePoint. But that's part of what makes this very different, unique, is that our focus on the hybrid topic was SharePoint only. So we didn't go in there like Microsoft had done this massive 6-month internal marketing study on cloud adoption, and there were only 2 questions on SharePoint, where that was our entire focus. So that's what makes this different, makes this valuable. And it's, I think I should point out too, that it's, the data, the reports are being offered, it's being offered by all of the sponsors of the program. So you can get it in a number of different places, but it's free. So it's, go and fill out a form and download that, but we're not charging for the information, because we really do look at this. While we had paid sponsors that funded the project, because it was the time and involvement with the school, it wasn't free, and all of the resources that they had access to. However, for customers, for people that are interested in viewing the report, it's completely free and open just to go and download a copy.
And we will put links to appropriate links to get that in the show notes. Let's talk then about some of the surprises that came out of it. People I'm sure will who are interested will dig through the details of the report, but things that as the researcher yourself, things that really jumped out at you as key learnings.
Well, what's cool about this experience too is that we had, and we went through and cleaned up this, and those that have done surveys, that they know that this number is actually kind of impressive, but we had just under 630 respondents to this survey that was actually out for open for only 28 days. So that's pretty incredible. And it was only, I think, about 35% that were U.S. based. So everything else, we had a great international response. I mean, Pete, you've done this kind of stuff too. That is a big number for that short of a survey. And then to have, primarily outside of the U.S. responses like in that numbers, it's pretty impressive. So we're very happy with that.
Now, is that 630, that represents individual, data owner responses or companies?
Those are individuals. We had actually 5 of those 630, and we did some cleaning, some other scrubbing there. So those are, verified individuals, but we
Sure.
had those people were across 510 companies. So we actually, as part of our analysis, we worked closely with Tygraph. I know that you guys know Tygraph as well. Good friends, MVPs over there. John White went in and actually did their Tygraph tools. We used Power BI to slice and dice the data. So we actually looked at the data by number of responses, but then we also normalized the data for if we had 3 people from one company respond, normalized that data and looked at it at a per company response rate as well. It didn't change significantly on those. It gets a little more interesting when you dive into look at the data by company size. But it was also across, I think, 54 different countries represented in those results.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, it was just nice and broad response there. But as far as other takeaways, I mean, the other things that we attempted to do, Microsoft doesn't publish the revenue from SharePoint. So we can't see, except for general statements that have been made out there over the years, really how big the size of SharePoint and licenses sold and all those kinds of things. So we had to go out and make some, based on those public statements, and we did verify public statements just to make sure we had the latest public statements from Microsoft, but looked at just the progression, the size of the number of licenses, the number of active users, the volume of the sales numbers, the data that has been shared, and we projected that in the next 3 years. So by 2020, that the size of the SharePoint space, the pie continues to get larger. It's actually going to grow by $1.4 billion. Wow. So for those that are like wondering, hey, we're not hearing much about SharePoint. Is SharePoint as a category going away? No, it is not. What we do know is that the number of net new installs of SharePoint continues to go up. It's not the hockey stick it used to be, but that SharePoint is still winning fans, winning new customers, and that we also know that now the size of hybrid is becoming the primary strategy for organizations focused on SharePoint. This is part of where I would say that the impetus for this research and frustration with Microsoft a couple of years back. They've been great the last 2-3 years in building out and focusing on building content and help around features specifically for hybrid environments. There's a lot of data that's out there now, but 2-3 years ago there wasn't, and we were frustrated that that there was this lack of understanding by Microsoft of what customers really wanted and needed. Customers that had spent a decade or similar, 5 to 7 years or more, and who knows how many dollars and people dedicated to that on-prem and building out and customizing it and building it to meet their needs. Now suddenly we're being told, oh, jump over to the cloud where there's not parity. They lose all of the customizations. They like all of the work that they've done. That's where Microsoft's understanding shifted and changed. And that was, again, why this is valuable to say, organizations that have made all these investments, you don't have to just walk away from all of those investments you've made, but there are ways for you to go and start leveraging the built for the cloud capability. And Microsoft is, they woke up to this. Let's be honest. They did wake up and realize it makes more sense. I think that the marketing spin was brilliant on their part, where they started talking about pulling down cloud experiences to your on-prem environment. And so the ability to go out, like I had a customer, great example, had a customer 2 years ago that, that was in the healthcare industry, based in the Pacific Northwest, was very skeptical of moving key data out to the cloud, and yet they wanted to take advantage of a lot of the Power BI capability. They ended up considering a solution that was drawing a subset of the data from their on-prem environment, pushing it out into the leadership team. So you're talking about less than 100 people across thousands of employees that needed access to this reports, but that they were pulling out on a daily basis data from the on-prem, and then had set up in Office 365 this subset of this data, and then building all of the Power BI capability, had real-time information being fed into that, utilizing that against this daily feed updates from these older systems. And so they were able to leverage the best of both worlds, maintain their, all the concerns around security and control over that massive amounts of data, and yet meet their growing needs to be able to go in and analyze that data and tie that to other real-time data points. So they were just looking at that was just a reporting solution, but there's certainly, plenty of other things that you can go and build around that. But that's a great example of companies that are starting to realize, hey, I don't have to go and incur this cost of recreating everything. There may be ways that we can leverage both and get that return on investment of what we've already built until that plays out. That's that old, that old operational versus what are the monthly costs of a service versus the infrastructure that I'm managing, and give me another 2-3 years to be able to slowly migrate off of that infrastructure over into the cloud. But in the meantime, give me the functionality that I need to provide value.
It's fascinating to see the results, as you say, of Microsoft taking ownership again of the message, which I think arguably is one of the reasons that there were people were so frustrated with them 2 or 3 years ago. Those results seem to be playing out in the research. When you look at, I know one of the things that surprised some folks around here is just how prevalent team sites are in hybrid and how little extranets are cited in the results. Can you comment on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I've got a lot of thoughts about that and using SharePoint as an extranet solution is a completely different discussion, because I think that part of I don't think that's like a reflection on SharePoint. I mean, okay, let's be honest, it is, but
right.
There are so many other options that are out there now. I mean, the improvements made around OneDrive for Business and using that. I mean, I use that every day. Every customer, every partner that I work with, there's a shared folder where we are moving assets, in between those things. Sometimes, and this is where you see some of the growth happening with SharePoint Online, so SharePoint in the cloud, where it's really more of a service that's being accessed. But now you have changes like I love Yammer as an extranet solution. That is my choice when I need to go and pull multiple people together from different companies and have the conversation, the collaborative activity, but do it quick and easy as Yammer. Well, one of the downsides to Yammer has been that when you share what is a secure file and conversation, everything that's in SharePoint, well, I need to go share it over in Yammer because that's where the social activity is having that collaborative extranet capability. Now I've got that piece of IP in 2 different locations. Well, with the updates to Yammer and with the push that Microsoft's been doing around Office 365 groups, we know that when I share a file now in Yammer, that it's actually being shared in through groups, it's being shared in SharePoint. So I can be confident that the security's there, the governance, the management, the visibility, all the permission levels that I need to be there around that content are intact for those Yammer conversations. So that the increase of using Yammer, of using Teams, of to some degree the Outlook groups, that conversational, again, it's all leveraging groups. It's all within SharePoint Online, but all of those other ways of going and interacting with external teams have kind of lessened the need to go through some of the pain historically of creating an extranet solution using SharePoint. But I mean, like I said, that's a longer conversation around that, but I think that has attributed to why we see less of a use case there and need, because there's all these other options.
I'd be remiss, given our role in the field, to ask your thoughts on search and how search fits into the hybrid SharePoint picture. Any insights from the results there?
Well, there are some. As you go through and we kind of break out where some of the trends and what people are talking about, where they see alignment, where they're really focused. And in searches, I'd say, so looking at like the features currently used on hybrid, if you've got a copy of the report, it's actually on page 17, figure 11, where it goes through and says, well, number 1 feature used at 68% across existing hybrid usage. Single sign-on is number 1 at 68%. OneDrive for Business at 66%. So going down to search is in the 6th place, but it's at, 64%. So it's not far off from that top number. So 64% of organizations that are doing hybrid today are focused on search. Well, then if you go down and look at where they're focused in the future, that there's single sign-on drops down to the number 8 or 9 spot, and search remains right there in the middle. It's one of those things where it works. It's in fact, there was people say, hey, but there wasn't hybrid when hybrid in 2007 2010 environments. There's no hybrid. Well, technically there are. In fact, there's guidance out on Microsoft sites of being able to go and create a hybrid search accessing data from 2007, especially 2010. There's more data that's out there. It's limited, but Microsoft went backwards and created some of those links, and single sign-on and search being the two key areas that you want to be able to tie in for those organizations that still have those older versions of SharePoint. But to answer the question, Pete, it's still smack in the middle of where people say they're focusing, not because it's not important, because I think some of the anecdotal data, they talk about the search aspects, but just because it's one of the most mature areas of hybrid for SharePoint. And so I think there's a higher level of confidence that people understand, no, I can go and hook up these other systems, these other file shares and other things, and make that searchable within my environment. It's not an area that people are, worried about, like, am I going to be able to go and do these things? It's fairly solid there.
As we get to wrapping up here, when you think about this whole process, any personal favorite insights or stories about bringing this data together and things that you learned that surprised you?
Well, it's always good to go and, again, some of the anecdotal information that's not within the report, which is the data driven, the all up. But over the next couple months, you're going to see some of that rich detail kind of come out, some of the war stories that we're going to try and share there, where we're going to be able to go and look at some of the differences between company sizes and really focus like a piece on here the issues, because there are differences. Companies that are under 200 employees have different experiences. There's some different data points of what's the priority for them than those that are over 10,000 seats. Like I said at the beginning, I don't think that there were necessarily surprises, because for those of us that have talked about and lived and breathed within this world, what it does is it puts firm numbers around it. But being able to go in and look at where customers by company size, by region, the issues that are impacting them, it's great to put numbers around that and then be able to go and better address a couple of those things, which I think maybe are higher up on the list than we thought. I thought search would be up at the top of that, but going and looking at some of the areas where people are going to go and grow out their environments, and being able to address that by company size. The number one feature to be used in the future is auditing. It's at the top of the list, where organizations are concerned about their ability, and this is a key part of that governance story, and that's something that it proved out what I've been saying for years, is that it's a hybrid. Like, people have this idea that, well, I own all these tools, I've got dashboards built. It's like, right. So have you now gone and built that out to support two systems? Because Microsoft does not provide a unified dashboard across all of those environments. You could have multiple farms. You could then have even now their customers that have multiple tenants in Office 365. So there's a lot of complexity there, and there are commonalities for sure, but your tools that you're using likely don't work across all of those things. And so seeing auditing at the top of that list, and extranet is number 2, by the way, Pete, of the features to be used on hybrid in the future. So in the next 3 to 5 years. But to see auditing as number 1, that was validation to everything that I've been talking about the last 4 or 5 years around hybrid. Mm-hmm. So it's just great to put the data around it and talk to that. And I think we have confidence in the percentages of the impact around these things. So definitely worth taking a look at.
Well, and I'm sure it has given you just the nugget of insight that you need to start speccing out your next major research project already. I know that that you're ready to go.
Oh yeah. Yeah. There's already plans in the works. There's actually one of the sponsors of this one. I won't say yet. There's not announcements around it. It's not scoped out. But there's going to be one that'll be happening in this fall where we're actually then taking a slice of this, using this as a baseline and going deeper into one aspect. So yeah, there's definitely interest in doing something similar. And that's part of what my company CollabTalk does. So any organizations that are interested in doing similar research efforts, please reach out. That's what I'm doing now. I'm very excited about doing additional research, partnering with BYU. We're actually looking at adding another university into the mix with another specialization, and doing this as a regular thing.
Where should we point people to for the quickest access to the work that you're doing? Obviously, CollabTalk. We have links in the show notes. Get the survey. You can get it from the sponsors, and I'm sure you have links over at your site as well.
Exactly. It's the shortened URL. I've got a landing page that's out there. It's just it's hybrid sp.collabtalk.com. But that we had 15 different sponsors of this research, and all of them will be promoting this link or their own link. So you'll be able to find it in multiple places out there. In fact, if you go out to redmondmag.com, Jeffrey Schwartz did an article, kind of a summarize some of the points that he pulled out of it, went out live yesterday as well. So you're going to be able to find it in multiple places.
Wonderful. Swipe over on your show notes and your podcast player of choice, and you'll see all of those links that I'm sure will take you into the data. This is great stuff. You can find more from Christian Buckley over at CollabTalk and at his site, buckleyplanet.com. Christian, thank you so much for your time and attention today, and we'll have you back to have that extranet conversation in the future. All right?
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me, Pete, and sorry Jeff couldn't be here, but it's equally fun without him. We'll just tell him that. Yeah.
Thank you so much on behalf of Christian Buckley. I'm Pete Wright, and we'll catch you next week right here on Shared Insights, the podcast from BA Insight.